Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's another Sunday. It's another Shri Sunday New York Times read along. Our guest this week is Tony DePalma, author and 22-year New York Times reporter, foreign correspondent focusing on Latin America, Mexico, and Cuba. He is the author of a recently published book by Viking, The Cubans, which is an incredible series of stories. He also wrote a few years ago, The Man Who Invented Fidel, about the New York Times coverage of Fidel Castro and Cuba. We'll be talking about his career and his books when we bring him on the show. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan. He's been hosting the show for 5 years and counting. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer and occasional guest host of Shri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We're live on several Facebook pages, including Tony's page and a book dedicated to the Cubans and his author page. So if you're joining us for the first time or watching this on replay, thank you for sharing your Sunday morning with us. If you're watching on Twitter or Facebook, make sure you click play on the actual video so that we can see your comments, or if you're watching a piece that has been shared. Without further ado, we're going to go to our New York City cam from the Upper West Side and check in with Shri.
Good morning, folks.
Good morning, Shri. What are we looking at?
Yeah, we're looking out from Upper West Side, Manhattan, where you can see in the distance, Midtown Manhattan. Down here, you can see New York City quiet on a Sunday morning. It's usually quiet, but now it's especially quiet with the pandemic. We're here opening up a little more. New York City was the epicenter, and we are now watching in horror as the rest of the country, so many different places are now in deep, deep trouble. In the distance there, you see the Hudson River and New Jersey. As we like to say from Hamilton, everything is legal in New Jersey. Our guest is from New Jersey, from Montclair, New Jersey. That's where Tony is. And you can see, let's hear from you. Where are you watching from? Tell us what your Sunday plans are. Some of you are already Sunday evening, Sunday night. You might be watching this on replay, but we love having everybody here in this incredible community we've built over 5 years with thousands of people watching every single week.
We have Jonathan Borstein joining us from Union Square. Again, always the first one to comment, which is pretty incredible. Sujana Chandrasekhar is watching from New Jersey as well. One of the hosts.
Let me just tell you all that it's my honor to co-executive produce with her and Dr. Marina Kurian a brand new show called She's on Call. And today we have a very special episode, 11 a.m. Eastern. So after this is over, you take a break and join us at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's all a school special episode about the reopening of schools. We have an infectious diseases specialist. We have the president of the Pediatrics Association and the executive director of the School Nurses Association. You don't want to miss this. If you know anyone who has children, please tell them to follow She's on Call on Facebook and on Twitter, and make sure that they watch every week, Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thanks, Sujana.
Absolutely. Diane Stefani is joining us from Margate, New Jersey. Laura Silverman from Philadelphia. Doug Levy up early, as always, from San Francisco. Thanks, Doug. We really appreciate it.
I'll say about Doug that he jumped on my radio show, my spin-off radio show, where we on WBAI, and he was telling us about what's happening in California. So sad that New York and California put in the effort, and California is now still in a terrible situation, whereas New York was able to come back, at least for now. We don't know for sure, but for now, New York's in better shape than many other places. Thank you, Doug, for always supporting the show.
Patricia Freudenberg joining us on LinkedIn. We're live on LinkedIn as well. Hi, Patricia. And she's saying, welcome back. Shri didn't really go anywhere, but I was guest hosting last week. We had a great show with Claire Smith, who was inducted into the writers wing of the Baseball Hall of Fame. and it was really an honor to host that show. You can go back and find that in the archives. And we also shared several clips on Twitter afterward. So thank you for that opportunity, as always, Shri. We also have Susan joining us from Reading, Connecticut. Our friend Stefan Kaplan. He loves the New York City cam. Stefan joins us from Ramsey, New Jersey. There we go, New York City. And on Twitter, we have Louise joining us from Astoria. Thank you, Louise. Bob Veritoni from New Jersey. We have Dilip Masan joining us from LinkedIn from Dubai. This really is a global show that we have.
Dilip is one of the co-founders of SAJA, the South Asian Journalists Association. He's moved on to much bigger and better things, left journalism world behind, but we're so proud of the work that we did together 25 plus years ago to build SAJA.
Absolutely. And Deborah Kerr is watching from Asheville, North Carolina. Thank you, Deborah. We'll go back to our list of viewers later and see where people are joining us from. Lippy Roy from Manhattan, and Makran Boot from New York. Curry Hill, thank you, Makran. What I'd like to do, Shri, is to take a moment to thank our production team, because we really wouldn't be able to do this without our full team. As you see, Shri is our host. I'm our executive producer. And we have a team of people that help bring the show every week. Paula Kiger at Big Green Pen, Steve Taylor at Steve DeReeve, Julia Weeks at Julia L. Weeks, and Carla Baranakis at Cabara Cabara. What's special about our show is that in addition to producing a TV style show with graphics, lower thirds, videos, chyrons, etc., we also have people in our where we're streaming in Facebook, in LinkedIn. Paula is in Facebook. Steve Taylor is in LinkedIn. Julia is helping us with analytics. Carla has been doing an incredible job getting guests in addition to today's guest, Tony DePalma. She's also watching on Tony's page, Tony's profile. So if you're watching there, Carla will share links, help with any technical issues that come up. But thank you so much to our production team. We really couldn't do it without you. Again, Paula, Steve, Julia, and Carla really make this show what it is. And so you can follow them at their accounts listed there. Shri, any other thoughts before we jump into today's show? There's a lot we want to cover today.
I wanted to tell everyone and remind folks who may not know, who've heard before, that our company Digimentors does a lot of special productions, including virtual events and conferences, as well as white label shows for you. So if you'd like a show like this, or you'd like help with your virtual event, please contact me. We would love to talk to you. Our motto is don't cancel or postpone your in-person event without talking to us first. We've done events for 50 people as well as for 100,000 people. So please be in touch, sri@sri.net. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. So with that, we can go ahead and get into our show. Again, our guest is Tony DePalma, New York Times foreign correspondent, has written a new book called The Cubans. And we're going to discuss that with him first. Then we'll go into the paper and then talk about another book that he wrote, which is just fascinating, about the New York Times, the history of the New York Times' coverage of Cuba. And there's some great stories that will come from that. So without further ado, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Good morning. Good morning, Sri.
Great to see you. Tell us, my first question to all our guests, how are you? Where are you?
Good, good. I'm in Montclair, New Jersey. No place I'd rather be than here this morning with you guys, sharing the paper that we all love and respect, and having a chance to catch up with you. We've known each other for quite a long time, but haven't been in the same place or had a chance to talk for a while. So it'll be good to catch up.
Yeah, and we catch up with thousands of people watching. Nothing better than that. I want to tell everyone what an honor it is to have Tony here, legendary New York Times correspondent, byline that people have followed for so many years, and now you get to talk to him and hear from him. Before we just talk about your work, I just want you to reflect for a moment on what you see arrayed in front of you. Why do people care about the paper, whether they're happy with it or not? You said we all love the paper. Many of us do. Not everyone does, as you know. Talk about the print part of this. What is the significance that this still exists?
Well, sometimes when I used to take the train, when the train was running, or you could actually get on it without worrying about the pandemic, there were a few times when you start to feel a little creaky taking out a newspaper when everybody else around you is looking at a phone or a tablet. But I would wager anything that looking at that product, what you have arrayed in front of all of your viewers there today, is so impressive, in fact, overwhelming, as a weekly piece of journalism, weekly, but much of it was just done, much of it didn't exist yesterday. A lot of it did, right? The special sections did, but a lot of it was just created from yesterday to today. And looking at it overall, from the analysis to the incredible graphics to the unbelievable and unforgettable photographs that appear with such force in the paper, that really cannot be duplicated, no matter how many photographs you put on a phone and watch on your little screen, cannot compare to what you see in this photograph here by a fantastic photographer who I had an opportunity to work with years ago. So you put that all together, and it's just, I couldn't wait this morning to get out there to get the paper. I actually had to go a couple of times. I was out before the delivery man dropped it off. But it's always that little blue bag outside.
Yeah, I want to say Ron Thomas is watching from Dubai. Ron has been a guest on the show. He's a sponsor of the show, and he says you're so correct about the analysis between digital and print. And this show really started, Tony, 5 years ago as a celebration of print, when we were worried that print was disappearing. And of course it is disappearing in many, many places, but the time still exists. And for everyone watching for the first time, your friends who aren't sure exactly what's going on, we read the New York Times out loud every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. And we're joined by guests, occasionally folks from the New York Times. And just recently we had Tom Jolly on the show, print editor of the New York Times. And it was an unusual treat for all of us to read the print paper with the print editor. What is your prediction about how long? Oh, there's that show that we did. And you can find all our archives at youtube.com/Srinet, youtube.com/Srinet. What is your prediction about how long there will be this array in front of us?
Well, I actually think it's going to be around for quite a while. It's a specialty product. The number of digital subscriptions keeps going up, way up. So that brings in money that can help support it. The paper itself, every section doesn't have to support itself, and it never did. When I started out at the newspaper a long time ago in the 1980s, my first job was in the real estate section, which is pretty far away from being a foreign correspondent. But I always felt good about it. One, because I was able to be at the Times, I was working and doing stories that I cared about. But we were always told that the money, the revenue that comes in from the real estate section, which at that time was 3 times the size of what it is today, the Sunday real estate section, supported and subsidized things like the book review. And so I think that you're going to have lots of people who, maybe not lots of people, but enough people who still can appreciate the fact that you can see a photograph that looks like this, and then have an array of photographs like you have in today's paper on this special from the Amazon that simply cannot be replicated. Enough of them to keep it going, to make it worthwhile to continue to print it, while the revenues from the other side and lots of the other products that the New York Times is doing will subsidize whatever needs to be done. So I would suspect that I will always see a print New York Times.
All right.
That's
we have people saying hello, including Jeff DePalma. Tell us about Jeff.
Jeff is my godson and my nephew. He also lives in New Jersey. He's got a beautiful family. Hey, Jeff, one of twins. His brother Joel is in San Francisco. I doubt he's watching, but we may catch him later on. And there's also Leandro Michel, is a Cuban who was in the book, and I believe now is living in Uruguay. So he may be writing from Uruguay.
Beautiful. I have twin children myself. By the way, nothing worse than turning 17, locked down with your parents in a Manhattan apartment. They took it pretty well, but you can imagine what that was like. You never get to turn 17 again in your life. And lots of comments coming in. And Stefan says, also know that Tony was bureau chief in Toronto in '96 until being named international business correspondent covering North and Central America. Folks, please tag us. Please share this with your friends. Please post questions. Neil's mom's watching from Hastings on Hudson. And I want to share a story that Neil has shared before, and Sudha has as well, that Neil's father was a publisher of an Indian newspaper in New York for many years. And when he passed away about a decade ago, he asked to be cremated with the Sunday edition of the New York Times in the casket with him. You and Neil's here. Neil, I always kind of choke up a little bit when I think of that story, and that you are now paying tribute to your dad in addition to everything else we do with this show by doing this.
Every day, growing up, we woke up to that little blue bag with the New York Times in our driveway, and of course, he passed away. I guess it's almost 11 years now, 2009. And putting that Sunday paper in the casket was a very meaningful moment. And Shri, thank you for honoring that every chance, every time we bring it up. It just shows how important the New York Times is to so many people. And I'm sure that this is not the only story out there of that kind of dedication to
and
the paper of record.
We hear stories like that all the time. Neil, before you go and before we get into the Cubans, which is our next part, let's do our quick thank you to our sponsors for making this possible. And then we'll go. So just everyone watching, please stay tuned. This is the way we pay for this, is through our sponsors. And it'll give Tony also a chance to go into his Facebook and like some of the comments and remind anyone that needs reminding that he's live right now. So let's do that.
And again, thank you, Tony, for letting us stream directly to your Facebook personal page, your author page, your Cubans page, and your Twitter account. So thank you for that. Shri, let's start with Muckrack.
We are delighted to partner with Muckrack. I joined as an advisor, and we have a free Fundamentals of Social Media course that results in a certificate. It's about 2 hours of work. You can do it in 2 hours or 2 days or 2 months, Netflix style. mrac.co/social. Everyone, please take a look. You all know someone who could benefit from the fundamentals of social: Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, of course. So please check that out, mrac.co/social.
Absolutely. And then we'd also like to thank Magic Bus for their sponsorship of the New York Times Read Along. Magic Bus imagines a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. And as you can see on the screen, some of these stats are from India. 7 out of 10 adolescents do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. And 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach the age of 18. Thank you to Magic Bus USA for your support of the New York Times Read Along. We'd also like to thank Strategy Focus Group. In addition to Muckrack and Magic Bus USA, Strategy Focus Group, Shri mentioned Ron Thomas earlier, is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Thank you again to Mike Schneider, Greg Gallant, Pradney Haldapur from Magic Bus USA. Greg and Mike, of course, are from Muckrack, and Ron Thomas from Strategy Focus Group. If you're interested in being a sponsor, please contact Shri Srinivasan. His email is shri@shri.net, or myself. My email address is neil@neilparekh.org. And Shri, we'd like to thank, we'll see, which Shri do we want to show? The side view? Too many Shris. We want to encourage people to visit their websites. There's some great information. You can learn more about our sponsors. So you can reach them at readalong.link/muckrack, readalong.link/magicbususa, or readalong.link/strategy focus group. So thank you again for all of our sponsors for the great work that you do.
I was in the middle of just sharing our feeds with people. So everyone, please share this. Tag a friend. They can watch later in the day or tomorrow, but tag, share, get this out there. Such a special opportunity to spend time with our friend Tony DePalma, Anthony DePalma, a name that those who've been reading the Times have read for more than 22 years. All right, let's bring Tony back, and thanks, Neil. We'll see you again.
Absolutely. So which camera do you want, Shri? This one or the other one? Which one will work better?
For now. Let's stick with this
Great.
for now. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So Tony, welcome back. And let's start by talking about your book. And then we will get to talking about the newspaper. The paper awaits us, but we want to start with the Cubans. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. It's also give the full title of the book. So I'll just read a little bit of the praise for it. It's the Cubans, Ordinary Lives in Extraordinary Times by Anthony DePalma. And praise includes from my friend Mirta Ojito, this book is a jewel. Jonathan Alter, indispensable. Ruth Behar, profound and eloquent. Richard Blanco, the next time someone tells me I want to Cuba before it changes, I will insist they read the Cubans. So tell us about the book, how it came about, how you decided, because this is not your first book, but how you decided that this is the book you wanted to write, and what will people find in the book?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so here we go. I have a chance to do it. We actually have an edition in England. They went with a different cover, which was interesting. It's the first time that's actually happened. They went with one that was, they felt a little bit more evocative, where the one here was pretty straightforward. And the focus in both, and the focus from the very beginning of the project, was to give an opportunity to people in Cuba who we hardly ever hear from. I mean, for the last 60 years since the revolution and Fidel Castro's government took over, it's almost as if the people there had signed a non-disclosure agreement, and they haven't spoken. We heard for, until 2016, Fidel. That was the voice of Cuba. Fidel, and then to a lesser extent, his brother Raul, and even years after he passed, Che Guevara was the voice of the Cuban Revolution, even though Che was from Argentina. And then the only Cubans we heard from were those in Miami, who are a very conservative lot. In the past, they were more so than they are now. And they had a very particular point of view about the revolution and about the relationship that the United States should have with Cuba. So ordinary Cubans, who I know personally, point of disclosure, my wife, Miriam, was born in Cuba and came to the United States as a young girl, lived in New York City, and then we met in New Jersey at a Catholic high school. She on the girls' side, and I was on the boys' side of the same high school. So we've been together for a long time. My first visit to Cuba with her was in 1979, way before I started working for the New York Times. So Cuba has become a personal and professional passion for me. The opportunity to write the book came up after Fidel died. And we were looking at what was going to be a change, we expected a change, in Cuba. The Obama administration had restored diplomatic relations with Cuba that had been broken for half a century. Americans were being allowed to go there. In fact, the New York Times, through an arm that's called Times Journeys, was sponsoring trips to Cuba. And I had the opportunity to accompany several of those trips with dedicated New York Times readers, and gave me a real earful of what the New York Times means to them, that they were willing to take their vacation and come to Cuba with me and with an official tour guide. That's the way the Cubans do it, for what was billed as a people-to-people trip. And we had to do it within the confines of what the Cuban government would allow. So we had to do things like going to the Center for Sexual Rights and Education that's run by Raul Castro's daughter. That was sort of a sop to the government because that's what they wanted to show us. But we also were able to go into Granma, which is the Communist Party newspaper and the official newspaper, basically the only source of information in Cuba. We were allowed to go inside, and I was there to sort of help people understand how that news source, which is the only one that's allowed at that time, is different from what they were used to getting. And it was fascinating. So that was a kind of a people-to-people trip, but with lots of limitations. I realized the benefit of bringing Americans to Cuba, to having them see the way Cubans live, since it becomes, and has for 60 years, been such an important part of our foreign policy. It affects our relationship with all of Latin America, and in fact, in measure with the entire third world. You can see it at the United Nations every year. But to do it in a way that gave voice to those people who we haven't heard from, and not to focus at all on the Holy Trinity, or the unholy Trinity that normally dominates Cuba: Fidel, Che, and we throw in Ernest Hemingway. And so what I was able to do for the 3 years that I researched it, I picked a particular place and I wanted to write it as almost as a novel, with a number of characters, a limited number. There are 5 characters, all living in the same town, which was Guanabacoa.
Can you just walk us 1 second? Sorry, while we're looking at these pictures, tell us what we're seeing too, please.
Yeah, well, that's Guanabacoa. One of the this was a store. Here, I was able to accompany these people, which were arranged from a dedicated communist who took me to the May 1st Labor Day Solidarity March at the Plaza of the Revolution, where they had, the government estimated 1 million people. We got there at 3 o'clock in the morning and had to wait until 7 for the parade to begin. And then it ended before it got too hot, because this is in May. And I had a chance to view Cuba that I knew, but at a much more intimate level, including getting to know more about the religions. Most of Latin America, you may know, is Catholic. Cuba was always an exception. It was never as Catholic as the other places, like Mexico, where I lived and worked. Its Catholicism was never as devout as in Mexico and in other Latin countries. And they had a broad range of Afro-Cuban religions, like Santeria. And people in New York will recognize this image because to become a santo in Santeria, you spend a year dressed completely in white. And even if you're a young girl like this, she is preparing to enter the religion. And it's an interesting mix of Catholic imagery, so they have the saints, but African deities that the slaves who worked in the sugar fields brought over with them and were allowed to bring together. And Guanabacoa, the town that I focused on, is sort of the center of these Afro-Cuban religions. The people, this is a street scene sort of typical in Guanabacoa, which is a municipality of Greater Havana. And if you looked closely here, I love this picture because you've got the contrast on the left, a renovated house that's done under the most extreme conditions down there. You know, there's no Home Depot to go to. So just to get the paint or the stucco or those rebars on the top is a huge undertaking. And next to it, a part of the house that hasn't been done yet. The old man is walking by with a cane, but he's only carrying it, not using it. He probably was given it at one of their clinics. And the bicycle, if you were able to focus on that, you could see that the bicycle is actually a converted bicycle with a motor that someone took from a lawnmower or some other piece of equipment and melded it together to create this thing. Lots of your viewers will know that cars are a rarity in Cuba. The ones from 1950 that are sort of held together with rope and wire might cost you $20,000 to $40,000. And gasoline, when it's available, can be expensive. So people need to innovate and come up with alternatives. And I like this picture because that sort of shows part of how they do it.
So, Tony, can you let's see a couple more photographs.
Yeah. So every day is a struggle for women and men. Again, there's no supermarket to go to. There are no flyers on Sunday with coupons. You have to spend a good part of the day looking for stuff. This is the Bay of Havana, and we're looking at the cruise ships that come in from the Guanabacoa side of the bay. This in Guanabacoa is one of the most historic buildings. Guanabacoa was founded in 1554, so it's one of the oldest settlements in the New World, older than anything we have in the United States. This building was called the Casa de las Cadenas, the House of Chains, and has a long history to it. But it was very special to the people of Guanabacoa leading up to the revolution. Part of what the revolution did was to sort of divert resources from Havana to the rest of the country. And as a result, parts of Havana, including Guanabacoa, have fallen into disrepair. It's quite different from the Havana Vieja that tourists see today, that has been renovated and now turned into a kind of a Disneyland. So the people do what they can with what they have. So there is some repair going on, a lot of it being paid for with money that's being sent back to Cuba from family and relatives in the United States, Spain, Uruguay, and other countries. I had a chance to talk to lots of Cubans who've started their own businesses, as opposed to Fidel, who was a strict communist socialist and believed that the state should run everything. His brother Raul is much more practical. And in 2011, he set up a system of 230 different businesses that people could buy a license for and start their own business, including a shoe shop, using equipment that's probably from the 1950s and some methods that I don't think would pass any kind of work standards here. This guy, shoe repairman, in order to put that sole onto the sneaker, would put a little bit of gasoline on it and light it on fire to melt it and then slap them together.
Tony, I want to ask you a question about all of this that I've always wondered. Of course, communism means that you may not have the resources to have modern things, but we've seen other communist countries that weren't stuck in the 50s the way Cuba is. What is the explanation for folks not in the know of why it is that they don't have cars, they don't have these other modern, they don't even have shoe repair equipment? What is the simplest explanation of why they're stuck in that situation?
Okay, well, first you got to understand that if you talk to any Cuban at any time and ask a question like that, the answer invariably is going to be the same. And the answer they will give is, es complicado. It's complicated. And so there's no one answer, but I'll give you two answers. From the government side, the answer is our fault. The U.S. has had an economic embargo on Cuba since the early 1960s. Eisenhower originally established it. Kennedy broadened it, and it was made into law under Clinton. So it's not so easy to change the embargo. The embargo means that the U.S. companies can't sell to Cuba, but more than that, we sort of reach out into other countries and have laws that, although they're very controversial, allow the United States to sort of punish companies that do business with Cuba. So Cuba will blame everything from the lack of shoemaking equipment to the lack of toilet paper on the US embargo, which they call the blockade. It's not a blockade, it's an embargo. And in fact, it's an embargo that has a lot of holes in it. Anytime you're in Cuba, if you go to a restaurant and you eat chicken, that chicken probably came from the United States. There's millions of dollars of trade that goes back and forth, but there also are, in fact, lots of restrictions in terms of banking and other things. The other answer is that Cuba is an island of 11 million people. So in communist China, you have a domestic market with over 1 billion people. In Vietnam, you have a larger market. Cuba never had a market that was large enough to exist on its own. You also have a centrally controlled economy. They haven't done a great job of it. The one institution that does function and that always seems to have enough is the army. And so lots of the businesses that are run today that bring in tourist dollars, which are actual dollars that make economic sense in the rest of the world. The Cuban dollar doesn't have any value, but American dollars and euros do. Most of those businesses are controlled by the Cuban military. And so the money that comes in first goes to the military and then gets distributed for the rest of the country. For a long time, Cuba operated on other people's money. During the first 10, 20 years, it was the Soviet Union. Then it became basically goodwill donations from the rest of the world that believed Cuba was standing up to the United States. Then it was Venezuela, and Hugo Chavez and Castro had a close relationship. Now, there was an understanding that the Chinese would step in, but the Chinese, unlike those other countries, expects to be paid back. And Cuba is one of the biggest debtor countries in the world. And when it didn't pay back, the Chinese stopped. So now there's basically no one willing to give Cuba the kind of support that it had before. And you end up with a country that economically is stagnating, in fact, getting worse.
It's so sad to see for the people of Cuba. We have got some nice comments about the interview and hearing from you. People are learning so much today, folks. This is a conversation with Tony DePalma, Anthony DePalma, the author of The Cubans, as well as a longtime New York Times foreign correspondent. Vito DeGennaro says, nice interview.
Vito and I went to grammar school together in Hoboken. Wow. Yeah, Vito,
well,
hey.
Well, we got to say, since you have friends from grammar school and a wife from high school, that tells me that you are pretty good at keeping people together and keeping your relationships going, which is not always easy as a life of a foreign correspondent.
You know, I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of the real challenges of doing a book like this, even though I have those Cuban connections, I don't have Cuban roots. Obviously, looking at me, I'm not Cuban. I can speak Spanish, but I have an accent that gives me away right away. So as a correspondent attempting to do a book like this, where although I have 40 years of history, I started out this book without knowing any of the people that I included in the book. So I had to start from scratch. I had a number of years to do it, but a number of years compared to, say, the amount of time that I've known Vito, which is a long time, and also I see Barbara. We also went to grammar school together at Our Lady of Grace in Hoboken. You can develop that intimacy over decades, right? But when you're a correspondent, you can't do that. One of my former colleagues, Isabel Wilkerson, was the first I heard use this term of accelerated intimacy. Whereas as a journalist, a correspondent, especially somebody doing a book like this, you have to figure out a way to get people to know people and to get them to trust you and confide in you so that they will open up about their lives in a relatively short time. And I think that part of my personality that allows me or guides me to keep those relationships, to do that kind of thing, as well as my family connection in Latin America, a family connection, even one as distant as this. My wife left Cuba in 1962. She has no direct family there. No one I met outside of two people in all the 40 years that I've been going to Cuba ever really knew her family. It's still having that connection and being able to go back a number of times and sort of show people your interest. Latins are willing to open up even to a gringo. And I learned that in Mexico when I lived and worked there for the Times as correspondent and later as bureau chief. And even in Canada when I was there, you sort of learn ways to get people to open up. And I also have to give credit to the people in the book who, to a person, men and women, are as brave as any people I've ever seen, because they knew that opening up could expose them to trouble. And yet they never asked me to hold back on anything. I did, in the end, hold back on some things. Every Cuban will tell you that they all are criminals. The system makes them into criminals. You have to steal from the state in order to survive. And it becomes something that has changed their culture. But what I did was, when there were small illegalities that they were involved in, I felt that it wouldn't bring much to their understanding of the story, and it could get them in trouble. So I sort of glossed over that. But everything else that they said is exactly in their words, and they never asked me to change anything. That's pretty courageous for a place where you know your neighbors are watching and listening all the time.
Tony, I lived in the Soviet Union in Moscow at the height of Brezhnev in the 70s, and I know how rough life was, even for a diplomatic family with access to limited hard currency. My dad was an Indian diplomat, and so I just cannot imagine to live like they are living in Cuba for all these decades, and how we haven't seen even more people trying to escape. I mean, we've seen obviously all the flotillas and people trying to get out, but it's really a story that is undercovered, despite everyone knowing so much about Cuba. Still not enough. We do have to get to the paper, Tony, and I think you wanted to show one of our video. You had a video you wanted to show?
Yeah, there was one of the characters runs a seamstress shop. And just to give you a little idea of because there's a lot of people talking about capitalism in Cuba, and how you've got these now 500,000 people who have taken out licenses to run their own business. The main character, Caridad, was a prominent communist in the party, a vice minister of light industry for the whole country, who eventually gave that all up to start this shop. And in the shop, if Neil, you can start it, you'll see what they're using is this century-old Singer sewing machine that was originally set up as a treadle where you moved it with your feet, that they have converted into an electric machine in order to make school uniforms and custom clothing, which in Cuba, it may be cheaper to actually have somebody make you a shirt than to go to the store to buy it. Because everything basically has to be imported, and it goes through the government, and they take a cut. So if you're able to get material somehow and bring it in, they can make a shirt for you. But the conditions of operating in Cuba are tough. Another one of the characters is Arturo Montoto, who's on the other edge of the life down there. He also benefited from the revolution in that he was sent to Moscow to study. He's a classically trained artist. His paintings sell all over the world. But every time I would go down there, he would beg me to bring one of two things: either ibuprofen, because it's not available down there, or paint supplies, including graphite and some other paints that he just can't get. So he lived outside of Cuba for 10 years, came back because there's nothing like the Cuban sun, he told me. Painting under the Cuban sun gives his vision of the world something that he couldn't find in Mexico, Chile, the United States, or anywhere else. So he came back, even though he's operating under these conditions where he can't even get the material to finish his projects.
Thank you. This has been a master lesson in understanding Cuba. And we are just glad that you're able to tell us this. So everyone, please check out The Cubans and get the book by Anthony DePalma. Let's go to the New York Times and look at what's happening around the world. We'll start today's busy news day. As you know, there's so much going on, and we'll look at the front page, but there are so many other sections as well that we will want to study. Let's start with here, and just jump in anytime you want to comment. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Under pressure, CDC backs call to open schools. Risks are played down. Safety guidance follows criticism by president over tough rules. Just so sad to see what's happening. Actually, I think this might be yesterday's paper. Yeah, somehow I don't know how I did that. I have the rest of the paper here. So Tony, if you want to talk about what's on your front page, I'll grab my front page here.
Sure. Well, that's what I was referring to before. The principal part above the fold is a let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 column, a 5-column color photograph from Brazil, taken by Tyler Hicks, and it is part of a package that runs inside several pages of these fabulous, incredibly sensitive photographs from the Amazon. Now, 5 columns, basically almost the entire paper above the fold. There's no way you can get that kind of emotional impact looking at it on your phone. Tyler Hicks, I met believe it or not, in Albania in 1999 when he was just starting. In fact, he wasn't on the staff yet. He was a freelancer. And we worked together for a couple of days. This was during the NATO offensive. And we went into a part of Albania where Tony Blair, the prime minister then of Great Britain, had come in. He was part of the coalition with President Clinton. And we had to wait on the back of a truck for him, and Blair came right up on the same truck with us, and he was addressing some of the international troops. But Tyler has since become a staff photographer, and if you see his name on any photograph or any series of photographs, take the time to really look at them and study them. Inside, I mean, it's a very sad, very, very sad story. There are parts of the Amazon that are quite remote where now they have a level of infection from the coronavirus that's basically the same per cap as in New York City during the height. And they don't have anywhere near the hospital. They don't have a Mount Sinai. They don't have an NYU, Langone, or a Bellevue. They don't have any big hospitals like that. So people who get infected pass it on because they don't have PPE. They don't have the ability to have social distancing. And so it is running through the communities there, the communities least able to fight it. Basically, in part of the story, they make the point that this is what happened 500 years ago when the conquistadors first came and the Portuguese settlers, they brought with them smallpox and other diseases that just sort of spread through, going up and down the Amazon River without any recourse on the part of the local communities. So look at that. So this is from the online version. Now that's something you can't do in print. So to have the two of them together is just, it's fantastic. Yeah. Now, Brazil is sort of leading the world in how badly a virus can be contained. Now, of course, the president of Brazil had the virus. He now claims to be cured of it, having taken drugs that are quite controversial. But he likes to be pictured now bicycling or riding outside and doing various things that shows he was able to overcome it. So yeah, I recommend that. Even if it's just to study the photographs from Tyler Hicks.
Thank you, Tony. This is such an important story. And let's see what else is on the front page. Hawks set China and U.S. on path to lasting divide, hard turn in relations. Aides to Trump, fearing 2020 defeat, seek an irreversible shift. And you're seeing the impact of Republican politics on a lot of these issues. And Cuba certainly is a plaything in Republican politics, and we're seeing that as well. So here is the rest of the front page. With well-timed bets, insiders cash in on Sprint for a vaccine. Anatomy of an election meltdown in Georgia. I'm so worried about the 2020 elections in the U.S., about what's going to happen, how people are going to vote, and what the Trump administration is going to do to limit the ability for people to vote. A giant's last journey home. A string of memorials for Representative John Lewis has begun. And Law Swagger turns Midtown into an omen. A very interesting piece that I recommend people look at to understand what is happening in Midtown Manhattan. The Time Life building, the legendary Time Life building, where they've moved on from there. The Time magazine and the company that owns them have all moved downtown. But a building that used to have 8,000 people come in every day now has 500. A hot dog vendor who used to sell 400 hot dogs a day now sells 10, even though he has almost no competition. Today in history, I like this part of the New York Times. They run this every day. Mussolini ousted with fascist cabinet. This was 1943, and you are seeing that. How to give money in politics. You're seeing, Tony, as you know, the New York Times doing a lot of service-type journalism, a lot of small bits, very much like the internet, combining big, long contributions with shorter things to read as well. Tourist scares New York tries to lure New Yorkers. And that's interesting, right? You know that New Yorkers typically don't go to tourist things as much as they can help it. And now you see that. Interesting. We have our expert on Latin America here with us as La Caridad 78, beloved mainstay of Chino Latino cuisine is shut. I'm sorry to see this. This is in our neighborhood on the Upper West Side, 78th and Broadway, serving up dishes like Chinese pepper steak with Cuban black beans for over 50 years, and it's closed. Another victim of coronavirus. Dominica says, hello, we are excited to watch this interview and reading the Times from upstate. Quinny, Lola, and Dom. Who are they?
Family. That's our daughter-in-law and grandchildren, and my daughter Laura. Yeah, they're upstate. They're in Long Eddy, New York.
Nice. We hope we wish you and your family the very best through this.
Thank you. Sri, have you been in the? Have you had comida china, the Chinese?
I have, but as soon as I saw that story, as I was reading it out loud, I was saying I wish I'd gone more often. So
it was great.
Local businesses, everybody should support. Look at this unusual article. Ad in the New York Times from the New York Times anniversary. I've not seen this before. The New York Times is proud to honor our colleagues who have served the Times for over 50 years and made us what we are today. We're grateful to your steadfast commitment. So Charles Glassman, delivery driver, Vincent Savarese, assistant foreman delivery, assistant general foreman Robert Brown, 51 years with the Times, Frank Sparacino, delivery driver, 51 years, Darrell Thomas, advertising layout coordinator, 51 years, Dennis Colleagues, pressman journeyman, 50 years with the Times. Have you seen this before? Are you familiar with this tribute system?
Not like that. Not for those guys down there, and they really deserve it.
We did a New York Times read-along, Tony, with Mike Connors, who runs the printing plant. And so I got to read the paper on a Wednesday night. It was an amazing evening, as you can imagine. Live broadcasting from there was amazing. Some seriously ill patients can be treated at home is one hospital solution. Doctor's advice, rest up, drink plenty of fluids, and don't forget to register to vote. And we hear a lot about the Cuban medical system and how good it is, or at least how good the doctors are. How are they handling Corona, as far as you know?
Yeah, actually, they're in the reopening stage. They've reopened the resorts on the north coast of Cuba, but Havana itself is still locked down, so the airport is still closed in Havana. They've had a fairly small number of cases, and it really goes to the heart of their system, where they may not have the biggest hospitals and the most recent equipment, but they do have doctors in every neighborhood. What happened in this case, this article that you've got up, because of the embargo and that extraterritoriality of the embargo, there were face masks and ventilators and other equipment that China was donating to Cuba. The boat got to the Panama Canal and unloaded there and was going to be offloaded to another ship or plane that was going to fly the equipment into Cuba. The owners of the plane refused to do it because part of the ownership was in the United States, and they were worried that the Helms-Burton law, which is part of the embargo now, would affect them and their leaders. So the equipment that Cuba needed was stuck in Panama because of it. It was not one of our best moments. There was a lot of criticism around the world for the United States continuing to enforce the embargo, even while Cuba and the rest of the world was fighting the pandemic. Cuba has doctors that it sends around the world, and has sent, at that point, they were sending several to Italy and other countries that were in the thick of the fight. The Secretary of State in the United States criticized Cuba and encouraged or discouraged other countries from accepting this aid. Well, Cuba doesn't send it free, right? The government sends the doctors. The doctors get paid by Italy or the other countries, but the Cuban government takes 70 to 80% of that money and doesn't give it to the doctors themselves. And so the United States criticizes it as a form of indentured servitude that goes against international labor rights. And in fact, in many cases, it does. So again, es complicado. It's not just that Cubans are sending doctors, it's the whole story behind it. But yeah, they're doing better than we are in terms of fighting the coronavirus.
And that's a story that we'll be discussing on 11 a.m. today on the show that we co-produce called She's on Call, where we'll have our surgeon friends, Dr. Sujana and Dr. Marina, talking to experts, including the head of the Pediatrics Association, about kids and going back to school. There it is, Dr. Heather Kloss, infectious diseases doctor, and Dr. Sally Goza, president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and Donna Mazik, registered nurse, executive director, National Association of School Nurses. 11 a.m. Eastern. Please tell your friends. Please take a screenshot or a photograph of this. Tell everyone you know who has school-going children or knows anyone else who does. Please watch this show at 11 a.m. Eastern time. I'm honored to play the role Neil plays on this show as executive producer and being behind the scenes as we focus on the stories from the point of view of doctors and nurses. At She's on Call on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. Please follow them right now. She's on Call. Speaking of shows, the other thing I do, Tony, is every day we do a video interview about the crisis. And this past week, we did a story, we did a episode, so 9 p.m. Eastern time usually. We did one on Portland in crisis, and we're doing one again tomorrow, Portland in crisis, with Bernie Foster, the publisher of one of the leading Black newspapers in America, based out in the Northwest. And we're talking about federal agents' aggression in Portland stretches legal limits. Such a problematic story to see what's happening. In other countries, people are used to seeing how protests are dealt with in some other countries, but we never saw it like this here in recent years. And we're seeing that in federal troops stepping in and causing some of the problems rather than helping resolve them. Congress has become a festering mess. Can it be saved? After mocking Biden's caution, Trump is following his lead. Very, very, very gingerly, of course. And here's more, so many stories here that we won't get a chance to cover. Regis Philbin, TV's beloved, every indignant everyman, dies at 88. This was a big story yesterday for Americans. Most other countries won't have any idea who he is, but he put the American edition of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on the map, and his show, Regis, Live with Regis, and then with Kathy Lee Gifford and Kelly Ripa, was a staple of American morning television. And I can tell you that I had the honor of being on that show more than once when I was working at the local ABC station talking about technology. And then I used to teach workshops in the Regis studio. And the way we would get people to come in is to say, you get to be in the Regis studio. And he was just a great personality and someone who wanted to connect with everyday people. And he did a great job of that. And a very down-to-earth guy who was very friendly with everyone he met. Even though he was a superstar, he was very, very nice to everyday folks. And that's something that I will not forget about Regis Philbin. And Brad Watson, acclaimed author who relied on Southern roots, dies. And Phyllis Somerville, who's shown in secondary roles, also died. So let's talk a little bit about your other book. And we'll connect it here to the importance of looking at the life of a writer. In the work that you do, you got to write the obit of Fidel Castro. We're showing it on screen right now. Fidel Castro, Cuban revolutionary who defied U.S., dies at 90. Mr. Castro brought the Cold War to the Western Hemisphere, bedeviled 11 American presidents, and briefly pushed the world to the brink of war. November 26, 2016. I remember this piece, of course. We read it when we were overseas, and reading the Times obit meant a different way of looking at a story like this and the life of Fidel. Talk about that, please, and how you put that together, how you had a chance to write that particular obit.
Sure. First of all, I wanted to say you were lucky to have had a chance to meet Regis in person like that. He's one of the people I would have loved to have met and spent time with. I'm also particularly close to him because of his connection to Notre Dame, where my eldest son was studied, and I had a chance to have a fellowship there at Notre Dame. They loved him at Notre Dame, and he loved Notre Dame, kind of the way some of your viewers love the institution of the New York Times. He felt that way about Notre Dame, and it's I've gotten to know Notre Dame quite a bit over the last 15 years during our connection to it. So it's something it came up a lot in the tributes to him yesterday and today. So for Fidel, I came back from my being overseas to the paper in 1999, and in 2000, the then obituary editor came to me and asked if I would be willing to sort of take a look at what they had for Fidel. So most of your viewers probably know that a lot of the obituaries are written in advance before people die. It would be very difficult to do this kind of piece, which was 8,000 words, 4 pages inside and the front page, from the moment that we found out that Fidel had actually died, which was 10 o'clock on a Friday night. So he had asked me to take a look at what was already done. That was in 2000, so Fidel was probably in his 70s. Not any indication that he was going to die, but he was important enough that it was a complicated piece. So I did, but I already knew that one of the key things for any article, any obituary about Fidel Castro that was going to run in the New York Times of all places had to be absolutely clear about the relationship between Fidel and the New York Times. And that relationship goes back to the 1950s when a New York Times correspondent interviewed Fidel in the mountains when the world thought that he was dead, because he had come back from Mexico, where he was in exile, and landed on the southeastern coast of Cuba, but the government was already waiting for him. Somebody had infiltrated the group and gave the information. So there was an attack, and the newspaper, the New York Times, and others in December of 1956 had run the report that the invaders had been stopped, many of them captured or killed, including the leader, Fidel Castro. So that was the last we heard. Fidel was dead. He of course, he wasn't. He went up into the mountains, licked his wounds, got together some other people, and then after about 3 months, he started talking to his followers, and he asked one of them, well, what are they saying about me in the cities? And the follower told him, I'm sorry, Comandante, but they're saying that you're dead. He realized it was probably the longest period of silence in Fidel's life, those 3 months when he wasn't in the news anywhere. So he asked for a correspondent, a foreign correspondent, to come in to present his view that he was alive and what he was doing. Now, remember, this is 1957. There's no internet. There's really no there's no CNN. There's no all news stations anywhere. Newspapers, especially a big one like the New York Times, was a real platform for him. So he asked for a correspondent, and through a series of events, that correspondent was Herbert Matthews, who ran those stories that you were just showing, which really presented to the world that Fidel was alive. But the way it was presented, Fidel was winning the battle against one of the largest, best armed armies in Latin America. And that raised his popularity to the extent that eventually the United States stopped sending arms to the dictator, and Fidel was able to become victorious over the army, and then eventually took over everything. When he turned communist a year later, lots of people pointed at these articles in the New York Times. This is Herbert Matthews, the correspondent, interviewing Fidel in the mountains, and claiming that the New York Times actually, through this overly optimistic reporting by Herbert Matthews, gave Fidel the boost that he needed to win. And so William F. Buckley was famous for having turned a New York Times advertising phrase on the New York Times. Back then, when the classified ads were like 2 sections of the Sunday paper, with jobs for women and jobs for men, they would advertise, I got my job through the New York Times. William F. Buckley turned that around. Instead of Fidel, he legitimately could say, I got my job through the New York Times. And that relationship of whether or not the New York Times was too friendly towards Cuba at the beginning, and that helped, has sort of haunted the paper ever since. So when that obituary ran, of course, there were lots of critics who said, there's the New York Times goes again, presenting Fidel in this light as having stood up to 11 presidents when they just should have said he was a bastard dictator. And in Cuba, Herbert Matthews is still considered one of the founding saints of the revolution. So his typewriter, or what they claim is his typewriter, it's not, but what they claim is his typewriter is in the Museum of the Revolution, where I had a chance to see it. But I also talked to his son in doing the Man Who Invented Fidel. Matthew's son lives in Australia. And when I asked him about his father's typewriter being in the museum, he said, that can't be because I have it here in my back room.
And this was your book, The Man Who Invented Fidel, Castro, Cuba, and Herbert L. Matthews of the New York Times. Did the Times ever apologize, or did he ever apologize? Was there anything to apologize for with everything that's happened?
The simple answer in this case is no. The New York Times never apologized. Matthews never admitted that he got it wrong. He continued for years to insist that Fidel was not a communist in the traditional sense of the word. There's someone writing from Mexico. Gladys was worked with us in Mexico City, and she was a great resource there. Knows a lot about it. On the back,
here's Dr. By the way, here's
book, there's a photograph that I found in the archives at Columbia of Matthews receiving a medal from Fidel as a supporter of and a key part of the revolution. And that's one photograph that the Times never ran and never allowed to run.
How is he even allowed to accept that? Because I see the Times has rules where even nonprofits, when they want to honor Times people, they say no. Times people don't vote in the New York in the Baseball Hall of Fame voting, things like that. How did they allow him to accept this this award?
Yeah, well, remember we're talking about the 1960s, so it was before all these regulations were in place. And in fact, some of the regulations are in place because of Matthews. Very briefly, Matthews was a foreign correspondent for years, but in 1956, he was a member of the editorial board. That's the photograph, yeah. Right. So he's, at this point, a member of the editorial board of the New York Times, who was also allowed to go to Cuba to write these articles and continue to write about Cuba in the news section. So imagine today, where the difference between the news section and the editorials and the opinion page is so controversial, right? We had a resignation just last week and the whole James Bennett problem. At this point, Matthews was operating as an editorial writer and as a correspondent, the last one to ever do that because of exactly these problems. And they've never allowed anybody to do it since then. And Matthews was allowed to do it because he had a relationship with the publisher.
Sujana Chandrasekhar, our surgeon friend, says she saw that typewriter in Havana and looked at the history upside down from how we learned it. And today, again, Sujana is learning new things about that typewriter and about history as you can, as we all are doing. And Sujana, I know, is getting ready for her 11 a.m. show. So thanks for stopping by, Sujana. Great to have you here. Let's keep going. Since we are talking about Cuba for 1 second, I want Tony to say hello to Mirta Ojito, my former colleague at Columbia, where I taught for 20 years, whose book Finding Mañana about the Cuban exodus is, I believe, a fundamental text for people who want to understand that story. So if you'd like to say hi, you can.
Hola, Mirta. It's a great book. I would really recommend it from a personal point of view, because she came from Cuba in the Mariel boat lift. And it's the story of her passage and arrival. Very moving, very moving. I'd also want to shout out to a friend up in Boston, Steve Valero, who I know is tuning in.
And Mirta went on to win a Pulitzer Prize for the New York Times. So it just shows you what people are able to achieve. There's that book. Wow, well done, Neil. A Memoir of a Cuban Exodus. Mirta Ojito's Finding Mañana. That was the name of the boat that she was on. Folks, before we move on, Tony, I got to ask you about the things behind you on the wall, including a medal. Since you mentioned medals, it's not a medal from any foreign dictator, is it?
No. That's actually the Maria Moores Cabot Award from Columbia for distinguished foreign correspondence.
the oldest award in international journalism. Very proud that I got to see so many awards being given out, recognized at Columbia. And what is that newspaper hanging on behind you?
I have that there. That's from our time in Mexico, and it's a front page article I did about Indians, indigenous people in Mexico, and the photograph was taken by Miriam. So that was our dynamic 1-2 punch. She took the photograph and I wrote the article, and we got both on the front page.
Awesome. Oscar Matienzo says, love it.
Oscar is the son of Caridad, who is the woman I told you about, who's the main character in the book, who operates the seamstress shop in Havana, and her son Oscar. Part of the story, the unraveling story in the book, The Cubans, is Caridad's attempt to keep him in Cuba. Many young people see no future there, and all they want to do is leave. So she tried to make sure that he stayed and did everything to help him. He got his college degree in design and graphic design and design. And he took out a license and worked with Caridad designing things for the seamstress shop. But not to give away too much of the book, but her strategy didn't work.
Thank you. Carla Baranakis, our good friend and who helped get you here onto our show, and also former national copy chief of the New York Times, says, after traveling the world, how is Tony handling staying in one place because of COVID-19? Is this the longest you've been in one place that you can remember?
With these kinds of restrictions, probably for 40 years. Yeah. But it's interesting that it comes at this time. I haven't even been able to bring a book to Oscar's mother or Montoto, the artist, or anybody else in Cuba. I haven't been able to go back. We've been shut down, and then they shut down, and they're still shut down. Whether or not I'd be allowed in, I don't know, but I haven't even been able to try. And I think part of this experience for me is particularly interesting because it's, in some ways, it gives us a sense of the restrictions of living in Cuba. You're not allowed to go where you want to go. You can't leave the country just because you want to go. And when you go to the store, if you can get to the store, there's no toilet paper, there's no Lysol, there's no soap, and there may not be chicken or pork in the store. Imagine living like that for 60 years.
It is so sad to see the situation and to hear and read about it. One last thing I want to ask you about Cuba is about the politics of Florida, now an epicenter. We always say that it's the Cubans and the Cuban Americans who control the Republican Party there. Do you see that influence ever changing, or as long as they're holding a grudge mostly from their own experience and they're punishing their people from their community for 60 years, aren't they?
Yep. Yeah, they are. Will it ever change? We're now into a third generation of Cuban Americans. So the grandparents maybe were the ones who originally left in the 1950s and 1960s. They were the most conservative. Their children heard the stories of what life was like in 1958 before he came along. And in Cuba, you don't even have to say Fidel. You just would do this. And that's enough to represent Fidel. So the children were brought up on those stories with a lot of resentment, but they're now getting older as well. The third generation has never been to Cuba. They may not speak Spanish. They don't really have any of that ingrown resentment. And we saw in the last election that many of them were willing to vote for the Democrat. In fact, I think in Cuba, they expected Hillary Clinton to be the next president. And that's why, as Obama was sort of offering them a peaceful way forward, they were hesitant to take too much action because they felt that they could deal more with more patience, and they had 4 or 8 years ahead. They had no idea that Trump was going to win, or that he was going to take the turn. Well, they figured if he won, that he would take the turn, but they didn't expect that to happen. So we could have gotten farther along in restoring relations. The Cubans were very slow at it. And then, of course, within a few months, the Trump administration reversed a lot of what Obama had put in, and all those times journeys to Cuba have been canceled.
We have only about 15 minutes or so with Tony DePalma. So we're going to try to read the rest of the paper here, or glance at the rest of the paper, Tony. So we'll do quick comments and quick questions. I wanted to first show people these 2 articles that were very popular or famous, infamous on Twitter yesterday. One was about people with second homes. And our colleague Bill Gruskin at Columbia Journalism School said, why do people agree to be in stories like this, where they come across as super rich, super arrogant people? And there's a whole thread about this. I don't know if you caught that, Tony, but why do people agree to be in stories like this was a question about these super rich people in the middle of all this chaos. The other story was Maureen Dowd's front of the style section, Over the Moon, the Billionaire Space Oddity on Life with Grimes and Baby X, Trump, Tesla, Facebook fumbles, and everything under the sun, about Elon Musk. It is one of those interviews you say is an insane interview, and that's really what it felt like. I don't know if you caught either story.
Well, as I think I mentioned, I started out at the real estate section in the paper. My first job when I was hired in 1986 was to work for the real estate section. So I do like to take a look at it. And Miriam, my wife, who was a bilingual elementary school teacher until last year, has gone back to renew her real estate license. So real estate is sort of a theme that we're always talking about. And one of our favorite parts of the paper is the part of the real estate section where I think it's called The Hunt. And there are people who are looking at various living possibilities. The paper presents them, and then you have a chance to guess which one of the 3 alternatives they took. So we like to sort of read through it, figure out which one they're going to take, and then find out whether we got it right. She likes to say, she's usually better at it than I am because it's what she knows. And she'll always point out the key phrase in real estate is not necessarily location, location, location that everybody knows, but it's that buyers are liars. And so I think in this case, the couple, it's a young couple, they were looking for a place in Long Island City, and they wanted to make sure that it didn't have stairs because their parents would be coming to visit. And I guess they're older, so they didn't want them to have to climb stairs. And they wanted to keep it at less than $3,000 a month, and it had to have 2 bedrooms so that the parents would have a place to stay. And they had 3 alternatives. And the one they picked had the 2 bedrooms, but they converted 1 bedroom to a dining room. It had the kitchen, but it was a 5-story walk-up. It never says what floor they're on, but I guess in that case, although they said they didn't want any stairs, it's the parents who got the short end of that deal.
Thank you, Tony. We're looking at the social cues section of the New York Times. This is the etiquette column. So I'm going to ask you one that starts because you've raised children and grandchildren. I thought you could give some advice also. So we'll ask you the question here, and then there's no right or wrong answer. We'll see what Philip says, okay? So this is called Okay Boomers. I recently graduated from college. I'm living with my parents and working from home. I've decided to move back to New York, where I went to school, because I'm craving independence, and the rents are relatively cheap. I'm not sure about that. But when I ask my parents to wear masks in stores or not to invite friends inside their home, they say, you're one to talk, because I'm moving to a supposedly dangerous city instead of staying with them. Do they have a point? Asks Kylie.
Well, I don't know what area of New York he's moving to where it's going to be inexpensive. There's a real split. I think I don't know how old this person is, but I think there's a real split in the way generations look at where we are today, and the proof of it is what's happening in the other states where they opened up. They're finding that a lot of the infections are coming from bars and beaches where young people do get together. I think the parents have a point. I don't know if it's sufficient enough for him not to move, but it's certainly something that he should take into account, that if he's going to live in the city and he's not going to have a car, he's going to be traveling with lots of people. He's going to be living in a building with other people. Our daughter lives in a 23-story co-op building, and she's very concerned about using the elevator before she comes to see us. So yeah, I think they have a point, at least for him to consider.
All right, so we'll leave the mystery of what Philip Gallant said to those of you who get a chance to look inside the print paper. We want to end by going to the Times Magazine. They have a very important cover story on the climate issue. As warming makes parts of the planet less and less livable, an epic climate migration has begun. Before we go there, though, I just want to do a quick tour of the other section so that people can see what's in the paper today. Here's Erica Badu on the cover of Arts and Leisure. The Metropolitan section, which you can't really get on unless you get the print section. In New York, imagine Central Park as a rainforest. Here are 7 ways that New York City has become more and more subtropical. And at the at-home section, which I love, lots of things to read and see here. We're finding our level. We're not, so lots of things in there. The book review, thrill ride, I guess lots of fiction and novels. And then today's also the kids section, for kids, New York Times kids section. This section should not be read by grown-ups. One of the things we did was we had some kids read with us a few months ago. And then a cover story on the 38th anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, Beyond the Law's Promise, and talking about something that has had immense impact on America and given people with disabilities so many opportunities that they may not have had before. And then the Sunday Review is the battle for Biden. Everyone has a different idea of what it's going to take to win. Which side is he listening to? I didn't realize, these are both Bidens. I wasn't looking carefully. So, yep, those are both Bidens. And do you have a prediction on what will happen in the election, Tony?
Not really, no. But I would like to take a minute. If you just go back to the special section on the American with Disabilities Act, it's interesting to note that it's all done, except for the back cover, which was an ad, it's all done in black and white. And it's actually larger print than the regular paper. And they did it as a sort of acknowledgement of the disabilities that they're writing about, which I thought was a perfect example of how journalism, like advocacy journalism, or journalism that is attempting not just to show the problem, but to point a way towards a solution, can be done. So very quietly, they did that. Black and white is easier for people with visual impairments. The color or the lack of color, I think, helps people who are on the autism scale. And the large print for a whole range of people, and the way it's pretty straightforwardly presented. I was very impressed by that and the way the paper did it.
Thank you for pointing this out. I'm thinking that our team that does the New York Times, our daily COVID-19 show should do an episode about people with disabilities, and we should focus on getting the editors of this section to come out and talk to us. I think that would be fascinating. I can tell you, Tony, that I wrote a story in the Times in 1996 about blind people using the internet. And That was one of my favorite stories. I've written about 40 pieces in the Times, but that one was one of my favorite. And to have blind people be able to read that in the digital age was one of the moving things about writing that story. And I encourage people to pay attention to how folks are accessing information as we get more and more sophisticated in our digital abilities. Let's not forget that there are people who have trouble accessing that.
Right. Excellent points all around. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so last thing we're going to do is look at the New York Times Magazine, and there's a video that they put together on how the cover came together. So we're going to do that first. It's called Behind the Cover, and then we'll have you react, Tony.
From the New York Times Magazine, this is Behind the Cover.
Our cover story this week is by Abram Lustgarten in partnership with ProPublica, looking at the ways that a warming climate will dramatically increase the number of global migrants around the world.
The story is both about statistics and then also very visual. So we first pursued a typographic option that played up one of those statistics. And we also made a conceptual cover that used the Earth as a pie chart. We liked the visual clarity of that.
But as powerful a message as those covers got across, what they didn't do is show the human story here, which is individual people on a huge scale having to make this excruciating decision of when to accept that the land is no longer going to provide.
Our photo department wanted to work with Meredith Kohut, an excellent documentary photographer based in South America, who often covers global health and humanitarian crises.
Meredith traveled to Guatemala, where part of our story takes place, but then she also went along the route where many migrants travel as they make their way to the United States.
This story was logistically challenging to report. We jumped on and off fast-moving trains and made long, sweaty treks through remote fields.
There were some incredible images on the train.
But she also got these wrenching shots of families on their land where it's just too dry to grow crops anymore.
Yeah, those images were the most easily understandable in terms of making clear why farmers would have to leave.
The photograph that we landed on shows an agricultural worker named Martin Yatchen, 23 years old, in rural Guatemala in a community known as Nuevo Paraíso.
We liked the idea of giving the cover a human face, but we also wanted some of the impact of the type cover. We felt like the cover that we settled on was the best of both worlds.
So many of the people I met while documenting this story are upending their lives, all in search of a safe place. Millions, just like them, will follow in their footsteps in coming years.
And if we as a global community are not thinking ahead to how we're going to handle millions and millions of climate refugees, we're going to be in real trouble.
Magazine, and I was flipping through this while we were talking, just to this is one of the things that I want to keep so that I can read later. Look at all these pictures and the story. The entire thing is about climate change, and really special to see this. I don't know if you've had a chance to flip through it yet, Tony.
It's part of the preview, so I had it yesterday. I really like that video. Until you actually have to pick a photograph and make a cover, you sort of take for granted that it's just there. They picked a nice photograph, but it's quite true. And having just done that for two different covers for the book, you have that one opportunity to make a statement and perhaps to draw in people. And so you want to know that there's, as the editors at the magazine know very, very well, there's nothing as powerful as a human face. So even when you're talking about something, a topic of global scope such as this, they want to have a face. And oftentimes one face works much more effectively than 1,000, some group photograph. It also shows the power still in this digital world, this digital era, of words. So you combine the photograph and a few lines of text, and you have a very powerful invitation to come inside and read something that's going to trouble you, but also enlighten you and maybe help you see the world in a different way. Because es complicado. The world is just as complicated in every aspect. as it ever has been, and perhaps even more so. So understanding is critical.
Thank you, Tony. One of the things that you're right about is that this paper is put together with 1,000 such decisions, not obviously as complicated as that particular one, but that's what puts a newspaper together. That's what puts the show together. The fact that the wording we use on screen, when we go to you, when we go to me, when we go to these comments, look at this. Sarah Smith says, Tony, this was a masterclass. Thank you. And Sarah's a good friend. We are so grateful to everyone who's joined us. We have people saying, great show, enjoyed the coverage, good to learn what's happening in the US, and many, many comments coming in. We're so grateful to everybody. We want you to know that we do this every Sunday, and it's the 5-year anniversary is coming up, and we're delighted to be able to do this. We do it because of the community. If anyone would like to be a guest speaker on this or would like to sponsor us, please let us know. But one thing you can do right now is just hit share or tag 5 friends in the world who you know love the news and want to get the news, or even if they hate the New York Times, get them to watch this to understand what it's like to do this kind of journalism. And this is what we're celebrating every single Sunday. I also have a daily show at 9 p.m. Eastern where we'll look at big things around the world, including this week we interviewed Maria Ressa, the Filipino journalist fighting for her freedom. And tonight we have Jamie Metzel with us. We call it positivity with an asterisk because we're trying to be positive despite every rotten thing going on. Jamie's founder of One Shared World and a technology futurist, geopolitics expert, and sci-fi novelist. And this is the show that we do every single day. We've been live for 137 days of the lockdown in New York, 137 days without a break, thanks to my amazing team. So please join us tonight at 9 p.m. And then tomorrow, Portland in Crisis, another important story. Bernie Foster, the leading Black regional newspaper founder and publisher, will be with us. So much going on, folks. Thank you for being here. We'll give Tony a chance to give us a final thought. I will ask him if he's a puzzler and does any of these kinds of puzzles.
I don't. But here, two points I wanted to make. One, for your positivity program, in the metropolitan section, that story on New York becoming a temperate tropical climate, the lead talks about a fig tree in the Brooklyn Botanical Garden that someone forgot to cover over the winter. So anybody who lives in the New York, New Jersey area knows that fig trees, very often immigrants brought them from Europe. And during the wintertime, because the climate was harsh, you had to wrap it. So you would see in the front of some little house in Brooklyn or in Hoboken, what looked like a stump wrapped in blankets. In the spring, you'd unwrap it and you'd have the tree. If you forgot to wrap it, the tree would die. They forgot to wrap this tree in the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. This year, it has a record crop of figs. Climate change is coming, but there may be some positive aspects to it if you want a fig tree.
I think I was just going to say about that. One of the things we covered during the pandemic was the Hamilton musical becoming a movie. And in that, I was just noticing the lines about everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree is one of the things that George Washington's final story in the movie, in the movie and in the play, in the musical, they talk about that line from Hebrew scripture. So I like seeing that. And your reference to the fig tree is interesting.
Cool. In the book review, you'll see that I think one of the top 10 books this week is Hamilton by Ron Chernow, but it was published in 2004. But it's one of the top 10 selling books this week, I think because Disney did the movie version of Hamilton. So good books never die. They just keep coming back. But the other point I wanted to make, not so positive, today is July 26th in Cuba. It is like a big, important day. Fidel's revolution began with a failed attack on a military barracks in Santiago de Cuba in 1953 on July 26th. The July 26th movement was the name of his movement. And although we've spent a lot of time talking about Cuba and Cuba-US relations, and people all over the world have been writing in and listening and asking questions, the one place that won't hear any of this is Cuba.
That's awful to think about, that they don't have that kind of access that they should to everything. The movement that changed the world began in Cuba on July 26, 1953. Wow. Tony, we could have kept going and going and going. There's so much for us to talk about, and your incredible work. I'm so grateful to you for being with us here today, for bringing your community in connection with ours. We want to thank everybody who watched from Tony's feeds. Please join us every single Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern, as we read the New York Times out loud. And we're hoping Tony will recommend us to his friends at the Times and elsewhere to be guests on the show. And of course, our daily show as well. So please tune in for that. And here's the book again. It's called The Cubans, Ordinary Lives in Extraordinary Times by Anthony DePalma. And there you see Mirta Ojito's quote, "This book is a jewel." And we encourage everyone to get it and follow. Tony is DePalman, DePalman on Twitter. Please check him out. And this is other book, The Man Who Invented Fidel. Most of you will not have heard this story in depth the way you heard it today. So please check him out and check out this book as well. So you can grab them online or at your favorite independent bookstore. Tony, thank you very much. We are going to do some administrative work here and thank our sponsors. And then I have to get ready to run our She's on Call episode with the president of the American Pediatric Society and others. So please join us 11 a.m. at She's on Call. Tony, thank you very much. And look
Sri,
forward to
you're a
seeing you.
jewel. You're a jewel as well. And thanks to
Thank
the whole
you.
crew. Yeah.
And by the way, I want to say you look pretty good for the pandemic. You know, people are falling apart during the pandemic who aren't sick even, but you're looking pretty good.
No, Miriam just gave me a haircut.
Okay, that's the key. Please say hi to Miriam as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. And Neil, you want to come on back? And thank you all for watching. We're so grateful to everybody. It was an incredible show. I learned so much. And this is why we do this every Sunday. We do it as a labor of love. Now with some sponsorship, we are able to pay our production team a little bit, not enough of what they deserve, but this is quality television style productions that we can bring you thanks to Neil and his colleagues and our colleagues at Digimentors. Thank you, Neil. And let's go to the sponsors.
Before we talk about our sponsors, Sri, I just want to give a quick announcement for next week's guest. Matt Goldman is going to be joining us, and we're definitely excited about that. Matt is a, oops, scroll down to his Twitter page. My apologies. Had that
That's
open.
okay.
Matt is a New York Times best-selling author and Emmy Award-winning television writer. He has been nominated for the Shamus Award and Nero Award. Matt's television writing credits include Seinfeld, Ellen, The New Adventures of Old Christine, and Dirk Gently's Ballistic Detective Agency. Sri, I believe you are a Seinfeld fan, correct?
Fan is an understatement. I am obsessed with Seinfeld, so I can't wait to meet Matt and to talk to him next week. Thanks to everybody. Please join us next week. We're going to have a great show with Matt, and we'll talk. I promise not to only talk about Seinfeld with him. And please join us, and please follow us on Twitter and connect with me on Twitter @Sri, so that if you have ideas for guests, we can hear about them. And please tag your friends right now and tell them to join us next Sunday to meet Matt Goldman.
And now let's thank our sponsors again. Sri, Muckrack.
Muckrack Academy, Fundamentals of Social Media, free certification course now available, mrac.co/social. And this is a 2 hours worth of content, Netflix style. You can watch in 2 hours or in 2 days, 2 months. Please check it out. 4,000 people have taken this course.
Thank you, Sri. Really appreciate that. We also want to thank Magic Bus USA. Magic Bus is another one of our sponsors. They imagine a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. And as you can see from the card, 7 out of 10 adolescents do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. And 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach the age of 18. These, of course, are stats from India, where Magic Bus does their work. Thank you to Magic Bus USA for your sponsorship. And in addition to Muckrack and Magic Bus USA, we also want to thank Strategy Focus Group for their support of the New York Times Read Along. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Thank you again to Muckrack, Magic Bus USA, and Strategy Focus Group for your support of the New York Times Read Along. Of course, Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider from Muckrack, Pradnya Haldapur from Magic Bus USA, and Shri, we should extend a happy birthday greetings to Pradnya. It was Pradnya's birthday yesterday, so I hope you had a great day with family and your little ones. And Ron Thomas, who watched much of the show today from Dubai, thank you again for all of your support. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor of the New York Times Read Along, please contact Shri Srinivasan, shri@shri.net, or myself, Neil Parekh, neil@neilparekh.org. And of course, we want to encourage you to visit their websites to learn about the great work that they're doing. You can find more information about them at readalong.link/muckrack, readalong.link/magicbususa, or readalong.link/strategy focused group. Again, we could not do this show without the great team that we have. You saw them earlier. Shri, of course, is our host. I'm the executive producer and guest host. But Paula Kiger has been with us helping in Facebook, Steve Taylor in LinkedIn. Julia Weeks, is helping us with analytics. And Carla Baranakis, she was in Tony DePalma's Facebook page, engaging with people. And she's the one that introduced us to Tony. So Carla, thank you so much for your support. And while we're talking about Carla, just want to give a shout out to the Local Connection newsletter that she does. You can subscribe for weekly story ideas and pro tips for local reporters. You can subscribe at bit.ly/local news tips. It's a great newsletter. A lot of great information. It's put out by the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University and offers, again, story ideas and pro tips for journalists. The best part about it is that it's free. But Shri, that's not the only newsletter that we want to tell people about, right? We have
thank you.
You put one out as well.
Yes, I put one out every Sunday. So if you haven't signed up, srinet.substack.com, srinet.substack.com, thoughts on tech, society, life, politics, srinet.substack.com. Every Sunday we call it SriNote. And again, it's all a team effort around here at Digimentors. If you like what you see here, somebody just wrote to me asking how we put all this together. Last week's issue was the lessons of John Lewis. But we talked about America opening up and what is happening with the schools, things like that. If you like what you see here in this show production, it's because we do these not for just this kind of talk show type thing, but we do virtual events, conferences. Please email me, sri@sri.net. We'd love to talk to you about your virtual event. Even if you just want to chat, we're happy to take an appointment and talk to you about your event anywhere in the world. We do dozens of events a month. And we know we can help you, at least even if it's just a chat with us, we'll help you. So please email me, sri@sri.net.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. Again, we have a great show planned for next week as well with Matt Goldman. And I know that you have to get ready for She's on Call. So why don't we close, Shri, with a little promo for She's on Call before
and then we'll also just show the card with the names of the 3 guests from this week. Because
Absolutely.
We want everybody to understand. You're seeing here an infectious diseases doctor will be with us, the president, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Just imagine she could be on CNN today. She might be on CNN today. And then we have the executive director of the National Association of School Nurses. They'll all be on at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's 40 minutes from now, please tag your friends. Go to She's on Call. Follow at She's on Call on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. You want to get to know these two amazing doctors, Sujana and Marina. They do this every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. You don't want to miss today's episode. Anybody with children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and just interested in what is going to happen this fall needs to look at this show, watch the show today live at 11 a.m. Eastern.
We'll share the promo for She's on Call, and then we'll end today's broadcast. Thank you for everyone for joining us, and please join us next week.
Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. I'm an ear, nose, and throat surgeon in New York City and New Jersey.
And I'm Dr. Marina Kurian. I'm a general surgeon in New York City area.
We'd like to introduce you to our new show, She's on Call. We air live on social media platforms from 11 a.m. to noon every Sunday Eastern Time. We discuss the medical topics of the week.
We have two great guests, experts in their field, that help us analyze and look at some of the topical issues of healthcare. And we are on 11 to 12, so please join us.
We'd love to answer your questions, so please share and watch and send us your questions and comments.
See you Sundays at 11.